on your standard. Looking at the Daily Nation, it is the same story that is given a different title. If we can get the Daily Nation, waiting for it to load up. There you go. Chebukati reads Riot Act to Raila, Uhuru on polls. But William, a country at crossroads, definitely uncharted grounds, and it seems like every single day something new comes up.
Oh, yes, certainly so. It's a very precarious situation for the country to be at. And I really like, in one of your newspapers, a contributor had drew parallels to the story of the Titanic. It was a massive ship, a new invention. It had high speed, and the captain of that ship, people had been urging him on to just keep on increasing the script, keep going, you are going to make history, not knowing that actually he was steering the ship towards disaster.
Towards an iceberg.
Towards an iceberg. So for a moment, I think it normally does pay to take a pause and reflect. Certainly so with all these revelations coming out, especially when you look at the language of the chairperson in his statement yesterday. One, he went out of his way and said he cannot, under the circumstances, guarantee a free, credible, and fair election. His reasons for saying that, one is that he is leading a sharply divided electoral commission, which appears that a section of the commissioners have indeed taken sides. And still, the staff who had been adversely mentioned for having bungled the August 8th elections, it does appear from the words of the chairperson that these staff are still influential and indeed are still seeking to influence the preparation and infrastructure of the election one way or another. He also lamented against the politicians that there comes a time where politicians ought to lay aside their selfish interests and to dialogue and to sit down for the sake of the nation. So that basically was a resignation statement, only that that word resignation did not appear there.
And he did mention, and he said at some point that I know many would be very happy for me to resign now. However, he's still giving it one more shot as it sounds. But would you say that possibly that is the mood right now for him, and it looks like it could be heading towards a resignation?
When you look at the Constitution, the chapter that guides elections, there are fundamental requirements that an electoral management body essentially has to meet some certain criteria. And that criteria, those elections and those who man those elections, one, they have to be neutral. That is a legal requirement. And a free and fair elections has to be held in an atmosphere where there's no intimidation, there's no fear, there's no violence. When you look at the prevailing situation in the country, especially in areas which are perceived to be the opposition strongholds, there has been interference of training of election managers. Some have gone through violence. And even when you look in one of the stories, the CEOs of those counties, 4 of them, have actually gone on record and made a declaration that there is not going to be an election in their areas. So you find that in those areas, there is this atmosphere of fear, of intimidation, which has been created. That does not meet the threshold of a free and fair election as required of the constitutions. The options right now for the chairperson is fading slimly. He is pegging everything on the meeting that he has called for the 2 principals.
Which, of course, he has to wait for them to either respond or ignore.
Certainly so, and going by the readings and the body language of the 2 principals, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta has vowed and is on record that he's not going to meet the opposition anymore. They want to go on with the elections. And the opposition also, they are very adamant that, in fact, on the day of the elections is when they're going to have massive mother of all demonstrations. So there are 2 issues here. Technically speaking, and this is something that has always been said by IEBC. Operation-wise, they do have the infrastructure of carrying out an election. They have staff in place. They have procurement in place. And issues of printing of ballot papers, those are in place. But then when you look at the external environment, In that, is there a conducive and peaceful atmosphere for carrying out of elections? No. Is there a general consensus that IEBC is neutral and is going to arbiter credible and fair elections? No. I think this is a huge indictment to IEBC. And if ever there was any good Kenyan in that commission who is of honor, I think the most credible thing was for them to reflect. Because essentially, as an arbiter, you ought to be beyond suspicion, like Caesar's wife. Certainly beyond, absolutely beyond suspicion. But where it has now come out, especially when you look at the words of the now former Commissioner Akombe, normally some of the issues will be discussed and passed at plenary. But then you find that it was a situation whereby 4 of the commissioners would come to those plenaries, not to discuss, not to deliberate, but to vote. And in our own words, and I quote, as if they're being remote controlled by from somewhere else. So I think it's a sad day for the nation, and the politicians should stop, take a pause, and desist from leading Kenyans to the edge of the precipice.
All right, and well,